Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudírayat. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridyantasto Hyabadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam Nashtaprayashvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, texts 74 and 75. Evam panchavidham lingam trivritrodhashavisritam esha chaitanya yukta jiva ityabhidiyate. Translation. The five sense objects, the five sense organs, the five knowledge-acquiring senses, and the mind are all the 16 material expansions. These combine with the living entity and are influenced by the three modes of material nature. Thus, the existence of the conditioned soul is understood. Purport. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Mamai vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manashashtan indriyani prakritistani karshati. The living entity in this conditioned world, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts, but due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Here it is also explained that the living entity comes in contact with the 16 material elements and is influenced by the three modes of material nature. The living entity and this combination of elements combine to form what is called Jiva Bhuta, the conditioned soul that struggles hard within material nature. The total material existence is first agitated by the three modes of material nature, and these become the living conditions of the living entity. Thus, the subtle and gross bodies develop, and the ingredients are earth, water, fire, air, sky, and so on. According to Sri Madhvacharya, when consciousness, the living force in the heart, is agitated by the three modes of material nature, then the subtle body of the living entity, consisting of the mind, the sense objects, the five senses that acquire knowledge, and the five senses for acting in the material condition, become possible. Text 75. Anena purusha dehan upadate vimunchati harsham shokam bhayam dukam sukam chanena vindati. Translation. By virtue of the processes of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. This is known as the transmigration of the soul. Thus, the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. Purport. According to this explanation, one can clearly understand that originally the living entity was as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his pure spiritual existence. However, when the mind becomes polluted by desires for sense gratification in the material world, the living entity drops into the material conditions, as explained in this verse. Thus he begins his material existence, which means that he transmigrates from one body to another and becomes more and more entangled in material existence. The process of Krishna consciousness by which one always thinks of Krishna is the transcendental process by which one can revert to his original spiritual existence. Devotional service means always thinking of Krishna. Manmaya, manmana bhavamad bhakta, madhyajimam namaskuru, mam evaishyasi satyam te, patijane priyosime. Always think of me and become my devotee, worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. One should always engage in the Lord's devotional service, as recommended in the Archana Marga. One should worship the deity in the temple and constantly offer obeisances to the spiritual master and the deity. These processes are recommended to one who actually wants to become free from material entanglement. Modern psychologists can study the actions of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing, but they are unable to go deep into the matter. This is due to their lack of knowledge and to their not being associated with a liberated acharya. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.2, Evam parampara praptam imam rajashaya vidu sa kaleneha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Guided by so-called psychologists and philosophers, people in the modern age do not know of the activities of the subtle body, and thus cannot understand what is meant by the transmigration of the soul. In these matters, we have to take the authorized statements of Bhagavad Gita 2.13. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara, tata dehantara praptir dhirishtatranam huyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such change. Unless all human society understands this important verse in Bhagavad Gita, civilization will advance in ignorance, not in knowledge. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanshakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindhuvyevacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, yeah, here we see that Narada Muni continues to speak to King Prachinabarhi. Now, in the beginning of this chapter, he spoke about the meaning of the Puranjana story. King Prachinabarhi asked, "Can you explain really what this means?" And he explained each of the details in the story, and explained their corollary meaning in terms of, it's a big analogy, right? And Narada Muni's an expert storyteller. And then, one of the points that King Prachinabarhi asked about was, well, how does this make sense? And it's a very common question a lot of people get, especially if they're new to Krishna consciousness, or even if they're practicing devotees. Sometimes it's a good doubt to have, and kind of here re-explained his doubt was, how does this make sense when one is supposed to be receiving the reactions of their past activities, but one doesn't remember them from previous lives. One doesn't remember what body they had. One doesn't remember what they did. So, how does he's even asking, like, how do the mechanics of that even make sense? So Narada Muni explains to him the nature of the subtle body, the gross body, because that's the key detail which needs to be there for this explanation to be coherent, is that there's a subtle body. And Narada Muni gives proof of that subtle body. Prabhupada in this purport in text 75 is basically saying, we don't have access to knowledge or a liberated acharya, so we just have to take the Bhagavad Gita's word for it. We just have to take their word for it. And that is pretty much the truth. I mean, if we get a little too analytical and doubtful about it, then it's like we might shrug our shoulders and say, I don't know. But there's enough examples, there's enough analogies, there's enough evidence for the logical mind to kind of put pieces together, and then combined with one's own Shraddha and Srila Prabhupada, one's spiritual master, other Vaishnavas, the Vedas themselves, Bhagavad Gita, Shastra, it becomes pretty clear that this is the only way reality can work, is that there's a subtle body, and that subtle body is actually the storehouse of all of our previous impressions. So you have to think, however many X lives we've lived, um, we've had, gosh, we go through the day having millions and millions of impressions. And this is a side point, but this is in some sense the source of um, like originality or creativity, even. If someone were to be a good writer or make a movie or produce some sort of painting or musical piece, they take whatever they have in their store of samskars, their impressions, and their reactions to it. Meaning, how does that living entity respond to their stimuli from these five senses? That's what these 74 is explaining: the knowledge acquiring senses, the acting senses, the sense objects. So there's always this input from these material stimuli to the living entities on the living entity's mind. The mind is part of the subtle body. And it's that stimuli which then gets re-expressed in some creative way. And that's why when you look at a movie or an artwork or any artistic piece of creativity, right? It's interesting and unique because that living entity, um, with those impressions from, again, some things aren't so deep. Some things are just maybe an expression of what they experienced in their childhood. But even then, let's say, no two living entities are the same, and that's kind of a very curious thing, that no two living entities have experienced exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. And thus, that's what makes artwork and whatnot so interesting. Narada Muni, earlier in this chapter, brings up dreams. He brings up the concept of dreams, that this is one proof that he gives that we experience things in our dreams which we've never experienced in this life. Therefore, there must be a previous life, and the mind and the subtle body are a storehouse of those impressions. So even though the physical body is gone, the mind and subtle body remain and give hints from time to time, like in dreams, or like I'm also saying, expressions of creativity, kind of from subtle to gross, right? That's what creativity is. You're bringing some subtle stimuli, some subtle perhaps a response to that stimuli, how I've interpreted, how I've processed that. And now I'm putting it in a piece of art, I'm putting it in a piece of any expression. And it reflects that jiva's subtle impressions and responses to them. So it's fascinating, although there's unlimited jivas, and that is said in Shastra, Asankhya, they're uncountable, which doesn't just mean there's a lot, it means literally there's infinite. There are unlimited jivas. Just like the Lord is unlimited and all his energies are unlimited, there are unlimited jivas. Another inconceivable fact. Those jivas are all different. Every single one is not only just an individuation, meaning we are ourselves as like a jiva, we are an individual part of this Tatashta Shakti, a conscious spiritual living entity um, who's in contact with these 16 material elements: mind, body, intelligence, false ego. Um, but we experience things completely unique, and Krishna as Paramatma sits in everyone's heart, in every atom. So it's a fascinating thing. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that the living entity is not. And how does he say it? He says, "I know past, present, and future, and I also know all living entities, but me nobody knows." And so this is um, obviously the point of Krishna consciousness is that we need to um, not only get in touch with our primordial source and our supreme, the Ishvar of this material world, but actually enter into a loving relationship. Bhakti comes from the Sanskrit root bhaj, to share. So it's not just about acquiring this knowledge and having this, um, mm, having Krishna. See, Krishna, he shares in our life. He has the spiritual world, he has his internal energy. So it's a great mystery. Why, one might ask, well, why does he have a Tatashta Shakti? It's a great mystery. Prabhupada says it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Um, but Krishna, his only explanation is that Krishna likes a variety of different energies. Um, But another answer is that Krishna just likes to share. Krishna likes to share himself, yeah, with a variety of energies. So Krishna shares in our reality in some way. He's also like the sun who never touches darkness, so he doesn't quite experience conditional life like us, for sure, he doesn't. But still, nevertheless, he's present. He's in our hearts. He shares in some ways. And that's the Paramatma feature. What Shastra and Srila Prabhupada and all our gurus, all the Vaishnavas are inviting us to do is then qualify ourselves, um, put ourselves in the association of those who, the association and service of those who then share in a personal relationship with Krishna. We share in his world, we share in his feelings, in his activities, and his friends' activities. We share in that. He's sharing in our activities, our mundane wake up, brush your teeth, go to work. I'm stressed out about this, stressed out about that. Krishna shares himself with us. He gives to us. It's sharing. I say share, and this is an interesting word. We might think, well, Krishna gives us this, gives us that. It's his energy. It's not ours. He doesn't give it to us. He's sharing it. It's on loan. So Krishna actually shares with us his energies. Um, and we are meant to share with him our energy, which is we are his, but we are meant to share the thing that we have, which is our attention, our consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So we put our consciousness towards Krishna in various loving ways. And then we share in his reality and see, how does Krishna feel? How does the deity feel? Is he hungry? I mean, that's what deity worship is being recommended here. Prabhupada brings up the Archana Marga, because Archana Marga means practice, not just practice that is not real, but in terms of in relation to like being in the Goloka Vrindavan or something like that, we need to practice serving Krishna's senses. And so that's essentially what he brought up that for, and yeah, that's the meaning of bhakti, bhaj, to share. So I'll stop. It's 6:01, but just some thoughts about these verses from today in the Bhagavatam, and yeah, thanks for being here with us.